remember to look. I'm trying to remember to look at the camera and know that I'm looking at you, but I'm going to look at you too. So I would love to spend a little bit of just the background. I heard from Joan that she's a former teacher. She's had a lot of experience with it. She's bringing some interest forward. She was in a more traditional school. And if you could just, within a few sentences, say what's bringing you as your interest, your background. So I have a sense of who's here. And we could just go around starting with Kaylee, I guess. Kelly? Mhm.
Sure. I think the main reason I'm here is because my son, who's 2.5,
Oh,
and I'm very focused on, parenting him. But I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but like as a profession, um, for the last 7 years or so, I've been a one-to-one virtual
mhm.
tutor. So it's very like technologically supported education. Um, and since having my son and taking a step back, I'm really kind of reevaluating my place in the education system. And I think my views on education has changed a lot. So I'm exploring a lot of different models, especially alternative education.
And so Claire?
So, I've always been very intrigued by the Waldorf approach. We actually live very, very close to a Waldorf school that was originally sort of a K through 8 school, but then added a high school to it. And my kids are grown now, and they went through the public school system, and mainly but it was a decision based on cost, essentially. Uh, but I really have a lot of, I really feel strongly that the way we're educating children today, and even during the time, that my kids were going through school, although it was a little bit pre sort of the internet in the major way, that it's just not serving kids. They're not really being educated in a way that we need sort of for the future. And when we were went on the Barichara immersion down in Colombia, and we had an opportunity to spend some time at Sueños del Bosque, and really see sort of some of the things that they were doing there. And so, and then I was just thinking, I have a nephew who actually is about to move into teaching at a Waldorf school and will be with the classroom for like the whole time that they're being educated, so the 6 years, something like that. And I saw in your chapter, I saw in the book about, that as a kind of ideal in a way to stay with a teacher and over that period of time. So I was intrigued by that idea as well.
Ellen? We'll just move quickly through. Yeah.
Hello. I am a passionate bioregional thinker who believes the young humans are the future and that the education system is completely wrong. I'm a retired movement specialist. I got paid to play and dance with kids. I at one point had a creative movement dance studio and spent the last 15 years at a private progressive school in Bellevue, Washington called the Little School. And then I have my master's in somatic psychology, and then I had the opportunity to do a PhD program at California Institute of Integral Studies. And I got my PhD in transformative studies and consciousness, and I wrote my dissertation on dancing between paradigms, bringing consciousness tools to children. So I did a transdisciplinary study of child development, early childhood education and care, and consciousness studies. So I have a whole chapter on exemplar programs, including Waldorf, but not only Waldorf. And do you know Josette Lovemore or Ba Lovemore?
No.
They're big in this field. So Josette was on my committee. And just when I watched your video, I was not able to attend your discussion. And I also had a discussion. I thought, oh, we are so like-minded. And I want to go to this book club. And I wanted to look at my bibliography to see if I quote, have you in my dissertation, but I didn't have time to go look, but I will look.
Oh, thank you. I look forward to hearing and learning from you in this session. Wonderful. Yeah. David?
Sure, thank you. So my background with education is I have a bachelor's degree in music education. And I was certified to teach K through 12 music for a while, but they didn't have student teaching until the end, which I don't know why they always put like the practical experience at the end, which I love the teaching part of it. However, I discovered all the administrative stuff, and then you sit in the teachers' lounge, and then you hear the teachers gossip about the kids. And I'm like, I don't know if this is for me, really. So I decided not to pursue that and went to IT instead. But that's a whole other story. But I have two children, a daughter who just turned 17 and a son who turned 10 not too long ago. We decided to homeschool our children precisely for some of the reasons that a couple of people have already mentioned here, that we feel the school system is not prepare the children for the world that they are going to be going out into. They're preparing them for the world that existed a few years ago, or a while ago anyways. So we were just trying to find some other path forward. And we looked at some different methods and things, and I had initially kind of really attached to like John Holt and John Taylor Gatto, if people have heard of those folks. So and then path goes forward, and I'm here in the design school and bioregional thinking. And certainly I had heard of Waldorf before, but I never like investigated it very deeply. So I'm curious to learn a lot more about that, how it kind of relates to bioregionalism, and maybe how I can kind of create some more stuff in my community.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you. And Gladys, quickly?
Yeah, so I apologize that I didn't know about the book club or your book or any of this till like a few hours ago. I am not involved with children. I don't have children. I don't teach. I teach in higher ed, and so I'm interested in what's going on in this space because it might relate to what I'm trying to do with these STEM educated students that are overly educated in like a very narrow discipline, trying to kind of open up their mind to other ways of thinking and seeing the world. And the bioregionalism frame is like something I'm really looking forward to using. And I'm finishing, I should talk to Ellen, I'm trying to complete a doctorate at Prescott College in sustainability education. And so, yeah, I'm just here to learn. So thank you.
Well, welcome all of you. And just want to sit for a moment because you bring a wealth of experience and thoughts. So for those of you who read the introduction, which sort of says what I have to say, the rest of the book is out there telling you about how I got there and what it's made up of. So I think the most important idea I put out in my little blurb, the understanding that makes such a difference, is that children are born with these enormous capacities, all different, all unique, no two alike, but they come in, getting the noise, they come in with tremendous numbers of synapses and gifts, and I believe that they come in with a sense also of purpose. It isn't just accidental and direction. So do we support that? How do we support the fullness of the child? Because the synapses that they bring in, if they're not recognized and they're not supported, and they're not allowed are pruned. So we have a tremendous role when we're teaching or parenting or working with children. That understanding that what is this child bringing into the world, and how can I support that? Not what does this child need to know, and I'm going to get it into them. It's a very different gesture. And it's that gesture I just like to start with. And wonder if you have any questions about what I said in the introduction in this regard, or things that struck you as being important.
I think that one of the things that struck me was just, thinking about sort of more holistically about all the aspects of education, the emotional, the social, the cognitive, the physical, the reflective, I mean, that's such a sort of rich, holistic approach. And just reflecting on how we overprivilege the cognitive, piece of it and undervalue, particularly the social emotional pieces. And what a struggle it's been. I mean, I've worked with some people in education, in the work that I've done, and so much of their sort of advocacy and effort has gone into, particularly with early childhood and the early years of elementary school, really bringing that sort of social emotional learning perspective in there. And it feels like we veered off of that, that notion of play and learning social emotional skills, particularly at the early years, just feels so important to me. And and that's kind of in tension with how things have evolved, where the cognitive has even just penetrated further and further down into, um, the early years of childhood and the early years of education. So yeah, I just really feel like, I mean, when you think about things like the mental health crisis that kids are facing, other kinds of things, I mean, you just point to so many things where the seeds of a lot of those things are planted very early, and like you said, whether it's synapses or just there's no space and support for it, there's just all kinds of aspects of our being that is sort of left out and isolated and stunted from our experience in school. So I'm just holding all that, I guess, and as I think about where we're at.
Oh, yeah. Um, I think it's that the problem is that children develop uh, in this idea of pushing the cognitive down into the early years is tragic. Because what we're doing is we're taking a bunch of little boys, particularly, who mature who need to be able to cross the midline in order to learn to read without being very stressed. If your eyes can't, you know, if you find them clicking and they can't follow your finger like this across the two hemispheres, they're not ready to read. They need to be physical. They need to do all kinds of things to get ready. And some boys aren't ready until they're 8 or 9. And they're perfectly learn quickly when they learn. They work just fine. It's just that to start them at 5, you're actually creating learning disabilities. You're creating stress. They're not ready. And so they get medicated for the idea of medicating little boys or girls, but particularly boys, for ADHD makes me want to tear my hair out because you're asking them to do something that is so against where they are developmentally. You're asking them to sit quietly in a chair and listen, not move around and do, be, and I think the point that comes forward with Waldorf in relationship and this sort of thing is that it takes a long time to really, with each child you have, if you have 20 of them, if you're lucky, and not 30 or more, to know those children well enough to know what they're needing. So if you're specializing in the children rather than in a grade level, look at the difference in that. Specializing in and there'll never be another class that's just like this one, or the children have that wonderful variety and breadth to them, and then they begin to bring it to each other. Go, Karen. Yeah, just
Yeah, I'm wondering, I worked in developmental education for a long time, which is which meant working with college age students who were developing their skills for reading, writing, and math. They didn't test into the college version of the course, and they may have to do some remedial math, for example. And there was one of my colleagues talked about math readiness in the sense of cross-body awareness, just as you said, and the way that we learn to crawl as children and the way that we learn to develop a sense of rhythm. I'm looking at you, Dave, and the music education aspect of how when we know how to subdivide in time to clap out four notes in a pattern, or learning how to march, or learning how to move your body in rhythm. I'm wondering if that has its roots in Waldorf. I've heard it in all these different ways, and my dad describes himself as a math musics teacher. He's a retired music educator, and was teaching these kind of concepts. But I'm wondering if you could comment on math readiness and Waldorf,
math readiness.
or anything.
Yeah. Well, I can speak about myself. I learned to read. I was tremendously motivated because I was living with a blind uncle that I adored. And I wanted to be able to read to him. So boy, did I ever, go into reading in first grade. I remember my teacher. And I read quickly, and I went to the next school because the war was over. I'm that old. And I was so far ahead of the other kids in that regard that they said that they would skip a grade. Well, it was just fine, except that I skipped second grade math. And I never really got back into it again because that process of understanding it by manipulations, by doing things, by moving them around, I was already in an abstract thing where I just had numbers, right? And I turned the numbers into characters in a story, and often would get the answer I wanted in the story. Anyway, I was hopeless. And it followed me through my entire career. So that was an example of having something set. Readiness is engaging in Waldorf. You teach math by stomping things out, by looking at everything that comes in twos, drawing pictures of it, what comes in threes. You play with numbers. You have tables with all kinds of projects on them, and you work into math as a practical. You teach, I taught fractions with the cooking. So you're always doing something. It isn't an abstracted worksheet type of life. So I can just speak to that. But other questions? So also Gladys, what did you just put up? I was interested.
When I think Karen, I mean you as well, were mentioning the awareness of the body. Um, Children need to play to experience their body in space, and then they somehow that helps them relate to things like mathematics and reading, those other kind of cognitive skills, but you first have to have kind of control or, facility with your own body. And there's this cool book that I have that when I used to know somebody had young children who didn't really move, right? They just were stuck to the screen. And I kept trying to like, let's do these fun cross body movements and,
Cross crop,
yeah, doing and even just, doing writing, because they couldn't write, they didn't have like any like mastery of their own body. Um, they didn't try climb trees and stuff. Like I fell out of so many trees when I was a kid.
me too.
Like it's a whole different growing up experience. But that was a great that book, Brain Gym. I think it was called Brain Gym
Yeah,
when I
yeah.
had it, and now that's the Learning Gym. Very cool. Like, 26, and they're actually really good for balance too when you get older, like I am. They're good activities.
We totally did brain gym every day. Maybe half an hour to an hour, just movement, particularly in that first year or two. With so many, you've got some kids that are ready to read, they can read. Let them start. They teach themselves practically. But meanwhile, you're getting everybody ready so that when you start reading as a group, everybody's there. And it's not a stress.
I had a weird experience in my kindergarten experience because my dad taught me to read before I went to school with phonics, and we had magnetic letters on a board and all that kind of thing. And so I show up in kindergarten and we weren't reading, but we had stories, and you had to put the story pictures in order, like Little Red Riding Hood and all these things. And I didn't have those stories. So the teachers actually thought that I had some learning disability because I couldn't put the story together. But if they would have just given me the book, I could have read it. So it's interesting that the
Yeah.
system was so, like you don't read when you're in kindergarten, but you have to know these stories. And then when you get to first grade, you should read or do whatever. So I was kind of in
The
a
danger
trouble.
is you get children who came to me who knew how to read, but they didn't know how to read. They weren't imagining what they read. What they read wasn't going into their imaginations. They were only seeing words on a page. And you want to bring it in because it's a doorway into stories, and kids love stories. And when they find that they can read a story, but get it the way that it lights up all of their hemisphere, they can imagine. Because recognizing words is not knowing how to read. We'll get into that. There's a whole chapter on it. But any questions about the past for me, what happened politically in this country? Was very interesting to me and relevant what happened in the 1980s. And what we were doing in the 70s and the 60s were really transformative in education. Not everything was working, but there were a lot of wonderful experiments going on. And any thoughts about that or questions, or do you want me to just more about it?
How did you keep children calm during awful circumstances? Like in Los Angeles right now, the kids are still going to school. The ones that are, even in downtown.
How do you keep them calm? Well, let's see. It depends on the age. That's a hard question.
Yeah, true.
Because the little ones, you hold them like you
Right.
you go outside. You go on a hike or you go, wade in the local creek or something that connects them to each other and to the older kids. Things are hard. I remember that we had it's if you've developed a strong community within your classroom, if you've developed an open responsiveness, there's no choice. It's not up for the teacher that you go in and the kids are there. And you say, okay, what's going on? What do you want to talk about? Shall we talk about this? I used to take the cue from them, what they were really ready to talk about, what they knew, I think one of the things I want to bring is that for me, this was such a profound changing and learning about myself, because although I was in a fairly progressive regular public school with teacher parents, I had a more traditional education. And I had to step way back. I could bring my lesson and I had to get through this, and this. It took me quite some time to begin to let go of that, to bring my lesson, but then always to let the lesson be what was living in the classroom. Sometimes we would drop it completely and go down that road. And other times, and the same time I had to be prepared. I was bringing new information, new stories. I used to tape the stories at night that I'd be telling during the day and listen to them while I commuted down to Marin County. Tell the story, go through it with the kids. But and we'll get into why these different natural learning proclivities. I think the main point that I wanted to bring through, and I don't see this out there in Waldorf education so clearly understood. I wanted to know why it was working so well. And then I realized that Steiner had looked at the natural ways that we are set through human history to learn. We come in pre-programmed for it. We come in ready for that. We come in expecting it. Community. Come in expecting this kind of stories. I was so excited to do the brain research and see what was actually happening that was different. Somebody's giving a lecture, your Broca Center lights up and you try to listen. And maybe you take it in if it's a good speech. But if a story is being told and the storyteller is imagining and feeling, living the story, and it was wonderful for me because my degrees were in theater. I had been an actress and I loved telling stories. So, I could get into the role and all these different centers light up in the brain. And they looked at, and the audience of children all began to have the same centers lighting up. So something absolutely amazing is happening with the story. This is why stories are so important in the work we're all trying to do. I'm trying to reach people, and I have to go back to this and think about how can I bring the story? How can I make this part of a story that can really be felt and light up? So it's, and playing, not letting children play. Are you kidding? I had a very noisy class, I have to confess. It was very exuberant. It was like herding cats. And the first grade was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was like taking that, going with that rather than, and finding a way to give it a little form and direction, but not setting it down. Yes.
Anna, can I ask something here? You're making me think of something, about the play. I remember being little and me and my friends would go and we would play, but we would make up things.
Mhm.
We would just take, we didn't have phones and tablets and screens and things, so we would just have random weird things in our world and we would make up stories about whatever, you know. Did you look at or study anything around like the difference of like hearing and listening to stories and then making up your own stories? Is there something, because we need them, so if they're missing, maybe we make them up? Like, just
They,
curious what you know about that.
well, all I know is that it's all a story. I don't think there's a division that the children loved. It was so exciting when they were learning to write for the first time, and learning to read and putting it together. I tell a story a little later in the book about one of my students, Ami, who, with my help, spelling every other word, wrote a story. And then she wanted somebody, I said, well, and she had never read. We weren't reading anything. I said, do you want to tell it or read it to the class? And she picked it up and she looked at what she'd been trying to write and she did it. And then all of a sudden, she just almost burst into tears and said, I'm reading. And the whole class cheered. And then everybody started trying to write stories that they could read. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't, it's not, it's just so deep in us, that proclivity and that, it goes all the way back. It's how all of the information and the tradition and the history was carried forward in pre-literate times. We have, thousands and thousands of years of developing our story capacity. So, and that's one. There's other, things that go along with the learning. I laid some of them out in that first chapter, just touched them, and then we'll dive into them as the chapters go forward. Did you have any other questions? What about John Holt? Was it Ellen that you said, or you, Dave? Somebody said that they had looked at John Holt.
Yeah. So I'm really resonating with virtually everything you're saying here. Like currently with, we've found a program. So there's lots of things, but I'll focus in on one or two because I don't want to use up too much time. But sorry, trying to put my 1,000 ideas into a concise package. Both my kids are in theater right now, and they love it. And we found a program that we really like because it's the goal. Talking to the education director of this program, her goal is not to like. There's a difference between putting on like the best. Let's try and get this as perfect as possible, versus let's give, yeah, we want to do a good job, but our priority is let's encourage and involve as much as possible every student to have their moments to shine and work together and create an environment where everybody supports each other. Everybody cheers on everybody else's successes, that sort of thing. So we love that. One, at least one other thing that sticks out to me that my son is involved in, anyways. But there's kind of like an age gap, where my daughter would be like significantly older than a lot of the other kids in this. But we meet other homeschool families and not at a natural play area once a week, and it goes year round. We're in Ohio, so it's like whether it's like 95-degree day in summer versus like maybe 25 degrees and a foot of snow on the ground in the winter. And people change during the seasons, and we don't necessarily go every single week in the winter, but and the idea is we just get together and the parents generally sit around, we talk with each other, and it's great for parents because, oh my gosh, I get to talk to an adult kind of thing, which is really nice. And then the kids just go have free play for like 3 hours. Yeah, and it's like a come and go kind of, come as you can. If you can't make it that week, no big deal. If you can't make it till whatever time, that's fine. So people just show up when they can, and we love. Well, I assume everybody that goes there appreciates this. I know I do, is the free play aspect of it. Having read like Peter Gray, psychologist. Okay, I see Ellen nodding her head. He's a big free play advocate. I'm guessing a lot of this is going to resonate with folks here, as opposed to structured stuff. Structured. I'm not trying to say structured is bad. I'm just trying to say there's some aspects of structured things that are great, and there's some things that just free play that are great. And what I think the free play gives the children is to practice creating the governance. If we want to use a technical term for like later in life when they're adults and that sort of thing, they get to practice creating those rules and the governance themselves.
Yeah.
Without somebody trying to impose it on them. And with as structured as our childhoods are at this point in time, they don't even get a chance to practice that sort of thing. So maybe that's a little bit where some of the dysfunction in our society comes in today, because people just don't know how to do it. Somebody else is supposed to give me the rules. What are the rules? How do I follow them? So I'll stop there.
Yeah, it was my students made me over profoundly. I mean, I would say that I was the biggest learner. I had to be. I mean, if I really paid attention, they were changing me, and I would just think I had it all together. And of course, they would turn into fourth or fifth graders in a whole new set of issues. And I would have to, I had to unlearn a great deal, if that makes sense to you. Unlearn myself and develop some of that. There were times, and I can only say it when I got it, and this incredible sense of joy and peace would come over the classroom and me. And if it wasn't there, it's not, this is a process. And where teaching and learning becomes a much more integral and connected process, not teacher-learner or whatever. And I had left public education when that, you have to understand that it was very deliberate during Reagan that our schools are failing. There was a big reaction on the right and the people like the Heritage Foundation. And they did not want this to happen. They wanted, and so the schools weren't failing, they were just doing different things. And they were taking these tests, and of course, teaching to the tests, going back to basics, wasn't for the children. And they used it to close a lot of schools and privatize schools. And that got pushed off a bit, but it went on right through Obama. It was very depressing. These big standardized tests that you have to take in a public school are lethal. Because if you really prepare for them, you're spending a lot of time just drilling. And the question isn't so much, there's a difference between getting so you know the right answer and how to take a test. I had to teach my kids how to do a, PSAT or something later, how to do those tests. Waldorf students take the top off of them, but you don't do, I did no testing and no grading until 6th grade. Besides just checking to see if they had learned, what they could do for my benefit, I could see where they were. So does anybody want to speak into that? I've talked quite a bit and I haven't heard from some of you.
I'm just a bit, I was struck by that passage about the Reagan era programs, because I'm in a state, like I'm in Florida, and we're kind of well down that path. We have there's been implemented a very significant, like a charter funding program, like a charter voucher program. And like I know, like my district, for example, that I'm in, we're seeing declining enrollment year after year after year. I think it's the same everywhere, but it's pretty bad here. And that is, yeah, it's exactly the story that's happening today, is that it's being justified to, shut down schools, fire teachers, especially in like special education, ESE programs. And so it just feels like a very difficult situation now because everything feels so degraded. And so like if I'm being honest for my own son, like I'm looking at alternative education charter schools. And so now there's this kind of conflict of are we feeding into that decline by putting our children in alternative education, or uh what's the right answer? Like what's the moral ethical choice? I don't have an answer for that, but I was really struck by that paragraph and seeing today, the fruition of something that started so far back. It's jarring.
I also want to say that through all these years, there are lots of wonderful teachers that have stayed in the public system, and are serving children as best they can within it. And I have no, it's, I think having public education is extremely important. Steiner's model wasn't for special schools, it was for public schools. He wanted to see all the children. And interestingly enough, he said that his educational program was for this time, that we would need it now in this century more than ever, where we are 100 years down the road. Yeah.
Something that comes to mind for me, about 10 years ago, I looked at becoming a teacher, or like actually going into teaching for the first time, I guess, technically. since I never went into it directly after college. So I shadowed like 3 different people in our local school system, like a special ed teacher, a school psychologist, and also a elementary school teacher. And going through that process, I could see the conflict in each of those people between what they knew was best for the children, but then the rules imposed on them that the system imposes on them that they have to fit in between, unless they're going to be, like a little bit radical and try and bend those. But that's a special kind of person that can do that for any length of time inside of a system like that. And so after doing that, I'm like, I don't know. I think if I start doing this, I'm going to last like a year at the most, because I'm not going to be able to do it the way the system wants me to do it. And I'm probably just going to get fired. So I decided not to do that and go another way. And then this makes me think of, like like somebody mentioned before, there's a lot of pressure on the public school system now. Homeschool numbers are going way up, alternative schools, that sort of thing. Well, so that puts pressure on the public schools. They're going to change and adapt to what people are actually wanting for their children, or I don't make it clear. I'm not talking about like the teachers and the administrators, specific individuals within the system. They care about our students so much. I mean, literally, teachers, I mean, we've seen are willing to die for their students. They care about them so much. So I'm talking about like the system itself. Is the system going to change to adapt to what the society wants for it? Or is it not going to change and then something new is going to come into its place? It seems like kind of what we're playing with in bioregionalism, like on a more general level as well.
Well,
And I'll leave it there.
Joe is very strongly supporting a really vibrant vision for how to involve children. It's much closer to the way that Indigenous children were within their communities. This is and it's based on the Waldorf part of it. Is that Steiner really observed kids and how they learned. He was watching them. And so he brings a lot of this to it. Waldorf schools can also get very dogmatic and stuck in their own issues, and we can talk about that later as we go down. So it's not like if it's Waldorf, it's going to be okay. But if it's Waldorf, at least the child is going to be immersed in a age appropriate and many different head, hand, and heart. It's a big deal. You're working physically, emotionally. It's a much, gives you a lot more to work with. But it's still the children that are teaching you. You know, it isn't Steiner said 100 years ago. It's the class that's in front of you that tells you where to go. Is this happening, Gladys, Claire? We have a few minutes left, and I'd like to hear from everyone. Ellen, does this speak to you?
Yeah, I'm very happy this conversation is happening. I'm a futurist, so what we're going through now in this whole stage of civilization, and I believe we're at the end of an epoch, and we're the midwives helping to go through. So I really share Joe's vision. I see a beautiful bioregional community with multi-generational interactions and learning to for the whole child. And like you said, really observing the child. I know in Montessori, they also, observation is so important to really see the child's interests, the child's skills, and to try and help them as they get older to find ways that they could be part of the system or the society and still be the best and happiest they can be, which of course means starting with caring a bioregional mind of caring about the highest good of all. So it's really hard to see the jump, like Dave is asking, from where we are now. One of the problems I found is that the beautiful alternative schools are all private and cost money, and it's a privilege. And that's a big problem. So I don't know how we're all building the bridge as we're on the bridge. And I personally, it's really troubling to see how we're getting to this vision that I totally see, that I know Joe sees, that I think everybody here who's participating in our school sees, of how we as a species can live on this beautiful planet. But it's so messy getting there. I applaud all of us for trying, because we don't know what we're doing. Yes, we make the path by walking.
Beautiful, Gladys. Thank you.
That's a really nice book. For those of you that have read The Pedagogy of the Oppressed and found it a little bit dense, this is a conversation between Paulo Freire and his best friend, who I'm totally forgetting the name of the guy who he worked with at those schools in Appalachia. Oh, yeah, Dave has it. What's the guy's name? You're on mute, yeah.
Miles Horton.
Miles Horton, yeah, that he had these schools, right? And I didn't know about him, and it was like these conversations between them. It's amazing. It was a great book.
Yeah. Claire?
I just am enjoying the conversation. I do think the kind of emphasis that you had in the book around, sort of building relationships and 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 trust. I've done a lot of consulting work with adults and leadership development in the field of leadership development, and you know, so much of what gets focused on is the importance of that, importance of the relationships and building trust to get anything done, right? I mean, to actually make things, to organize, to um, collaborate, and yeah, in a way, I mean, it's just so ironic to me because it just feels like those are the kinds of things that we really need right now. And I think some teachers are good and some programs really do try to emphasize joint, kind of collaborating, working together on projects, that sort of thing. But, like you said, with the movement that happened in the 80s and 90s and on, that was so much focused on teaching to the test, those things really were not emphasized and in many cases. And so, I mean, if you don't learn it when you're young, you're whether when you go into, if you work in a lab with other people or in a business environment, those are all skills you need. And if you're not learning them in the school where, you know, I mean, you're lucky if you get it in other environments, but school is one of those places where I think there's the opportunity to really, mm, you know, sort of develop and share a shared sense of values of what it means, what it means to become an adult, to become human, to really live into the things that help us create the kind of world that we want, and
Well, in the next session, we'll be talking about relationships. So we're going because it's the absolute core for us in this group, each one of us, but for education as well. So we'll be talking about relationship and community.
Mhm.
And that's a huge issue. I've thought about it so much more since I've even read, done the book. I've thought of, as I looked at Joe's vision, what does it mean to create community for those of us that have lived in such an individualistic pattern I've felt this deeply as I've gotten older. And my role has changed. So I appreciate all of you for coming. Thank you, Joan. I'm so glad to have you here too. You were quiet. I hope it is of interest to you and that we can, yeah. Karen, thank you for all your help. Do you want to?
Anna, how would you like us to be prepared for next time? What chapters would you like us to focus
I
on?
think these next two chapters are really important. So we'll look at, we can put some together. We can do 3 at a time before, but I would like to make sure that we do chapter 2 and 3, because it's a lot to talk about, which is community and relationship. If you want to look at the readers part, we touched on that today. And actually, that's extra because I put it in there. If you want to if we want to slip that one in, you can. We might be able to jump that chapter because I think we're covering it in some ways. But that would be great. I hope you're all here and that it's so meaningful for me to be able to talk to people about it. Bring questions too. You can challenge. You don't have to agree with me. I want to see you take this up. I want to get, it's
All right. Well, we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Thanks for showing up today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Can you put the chapters in a note under the thread?
sure.
I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, and welcome to all of you, particularly those of you who just came and found out about it. Wonderful.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Good. Thank you.